Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads. Lee here, and welcome to my week in books. First of all, let's address the elephant in the room. I have a bad cold, and I'm on the tail end of it, I think. But my nose probably looks red. This is the first day in a week I've put on makeup, and I only did that so I would look alive, and my hair is a mess. So, all that aside, I will try to get through this without blowing my nose, but no promises. I'm a real person. I've got a cold. Anywho, this has been, despite that, a great reading week. And, spoiler alert, this week is heavy on Abby Jimenez, and I'll tell you all about that as soon as I find my glasses. I read 5 books this week, and I finished one. Again, heavy on the Abby Jimenez. So, and I think I've said this in some shorts that may air within the next week, but last summer I read Abby Jimenez's Just for the Summer, and I was a bit taken aback by it because although it was good, there was real trauma and real relationship issues that I wasn't expecting. I thought I was going into a light rom-com, maybe some miscommunication, but a happily ever after. And her books do have happily ever afters, but they address real life issues that sometimes are glossed over when you read just a fluff book. And there is nothing wrong with fluff books. I actually went into this thinking it was going to be fluffy and nice, and again, I was taken aback. Now I wish that I had known that before. First of all, this is the third in the Part of Your World series. So this week I went back and started the first book, Part of Your World, by Abby Jimenez, and I just came away from this since I knew what was since I knew what I was going into this time, I appreciated it a whole lot more. So in Part of Your World, you've got Alexis Montgomery, who's an ER doctor, just an ER doctor. Her family does not like that. They're kind of hoity-toity. They have a name. And Alexis has just broken up with her fiancé and ends up having a one-night stand in a small town with a guy named Daniel. I absolutely loved this. All of these I think are going to be 5 stars for me. And Alexis doesn't tell Daniel who she is or where she's from, and
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
So Alexa thought I was talking to her. Anyway, so she doesn't believe she can bring him into the world, and then she gradually comes to realize she can't live without him, so how is she going to make that happen? I loved this book. Like I said, this was fantastic. I can't remember. I had read, and I talked about this last week, a sci-fi book last week, and then I just decided I wanted something light-ish because I knew it wouldn't be fluff, so I decided to read that. Once I finished this, I had something happen that was unusual for me. I wanted to keep reading Abby Jimenez, and I usually don't binge an author because I start to get burnt out, but I was like, well, let me just finish the series. I still remember very little about Just for the Summer, and what, took me aback so much, but I wanted to go on. So I read the next one, Yours Truly. Yours Truly stars Alexis's best friend, Brianna, who is also an ER doctor, and just getting a divorce, and he actually begins, Dr. Jacob Maddox begins sending her letters. I can't remember what sparked that off, and hence the title, Yours Truly. So they're exchanging letters, and they start fake dating, so that's a trope in here. Jacob's ex, I'm trying to not give you too much away. Jacob's ex is engaged to his brother, and so the family's like, oh, poor Jacob, poor Jacob. Jacob also suffers from anxiety, which I thought would irritate me, but Jimenez handles it very well. And so Jacob and Brianna begin fake dating to show his family that he's okay. And naturally, fake dating turns into love. So another great book. Next up for me, I have had this book for probably over a year. This was a Book of the Month add-on that I either chose as an add-on or because I didn't like the current selection that month. I'm out of Book of the Month now. But this cover gives me like some YA vibes or some young LGBTQ vibes. It's very light cover. I'm talking about The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed M. Masood. And this cover is not reflective of the tone of this book. So you follow two characters in here. Anvar, whose family immigrates from Pakistan, and Safwa, who's has a little bit more complicated story. She's from Iraq originally. She ends up in America illegally, but that is not a major plot point. It's a minor plot point. And I don't know how to describe this book. Even the blurb, doesn't really do it justice. It says, when Anvar and Safwa's worlds collide, the contradictory, intertwined fates of these two remarkable, strong-willed adults rock their community and families to their core. Yes, that is about this. But this is about religion and not being religious enough or being too religious. This was, the people who didn't like it, at least on Goodreads, didn't like the way he treated religion. I did not have a problem with it, probably because I'm not religious. But he talks about extremism, and there's interpersonal relationships, family relationships. In this, Anvar's brother does something that, to me, is unforgivable, but Anvar forgives him. Anywho, I don't know how to describe this book. It's really complex. It's about immigration, it's about families, it's about choices, it's about the war on terror. Very good, but it is not YA, and it is not a light read. I'm so glad I read this. I can't remember how many stars I gave it, but I absolutely loved it. I just, again, was kind of put off because the cover doesn't match the insides. This is a much more serious book than the cover depicts. Speaking of serious books, I've talked about this before. On the weekend mornings, sometimes I sit in bed, drink coffee, and watch YouTube videos from other booktubers. The danger in that is to my pocketbook because it never fails. I come away, I'll sit there on my phone while the video's playing and checking to see if these books are at the Barnes & Noble so I can go pick them up. And this book was. I'm talking about Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. This is a tome. It is 651 pages. I thought it would take me 4 days to read it. It took me 3. It did take me a little bit to get into this. Probably 100 pages. But it is... Once I settled in, I settled in. So, I am going to read the back of this one to you. After being rescued... Sorry, let me just add this. This is a story that spans a lifetime, literally. And it is told in 2 timelines. Some people said they didn't think the second timeline was necessary. Maybe... But I enjoyed it, actually. After being rescued from a sinking ocean liner in 1914, Marion and Jamie Graves are raised by their dissolute uncle in Montana. There, after encountering a pair of barnstorming pilots passing through in beat-up biplanes, Marion commences a lifelong love affair with flight. At 14, she drops out of school and finds an unexpected patron in a wealthy bootlegger. An arrangement that will haunt her for the rest of her life, even as it allows her to fulfill her destiny, circumnavigating the globe by flying over the North and South Poles. A century later, movie star Hadley Baxter is cast to play Marion in a film centered on her disappearance in Antarctica. Scandal-plagued and trapped in her role as a Hollywood wild child, Hadley is eager to redefine herself after getting fired from a romantic film franchise. Her immersion into the character of Marion unfolds alongside Marion's own story as the two women's destinies and their hunger for self-determination in vastly different places and times collide. This, I think, was a Booker Prize finalist, and I think it was a finalist for the Women's Prize for Fiction. My memory is not great this week because my head is all stuffed up. Again, I wasn't expecting the way this ended. Somebody on the internet made a comment that this was basically just the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo retold. It's not. It's completely different in my opinion. So when I saw that, I had a different expectation from the ending, and it's not what I got. I am satisfied with the ending. I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads and Storygraph. And I do recommend this, but with the understanding, settle in. We're talking about Marion and Jamie from their birth and before to their death. And I made a comment on a book I DNF'd a couple weeks ago about how I don't need to know everyone's backstory the second I meet them. You get people's backstories here, and it doesn't bother me. It's the writing style that's the thing. So, this book actually led me to my next nonfiction read, which I had thought I was going to read earlier this year, but I put it down in favor of Paris Undercover by Matthew Goodman. I finally finished this week. I plan to do a standalone video either tomorrow or Wednesday about Paris Undercover and my thoughts on it, so I'm not going to give you a lot here. I will say that Paris Uncover is about the book Paris Underground, which was allegedly written by Etta Schreiber. Again, I'll have more to say about that tomorrow or Wednesday. Sorry, my nose is running. I listened to some podcasts featuring Matthew Goodman about this book, and obviously he does not go into everything that the book entails, because, I mean, what would be the point of reading the book? Although I do know someone who said when he listens to a podcast with an author, he doesn't feel he needs to read the book because he knows everything now about the book. You don't. I highly recommend this. It's called A Wartime Story of Courage, Friendship, and Betrayal, and it really is an excellent story about women in war and about the things that the Nazis did to their prisoners. I'll just leave it at that so I don't spoil any. I will try not to do any spoilers when I make a standalone video on this, but I might get a little bit close. I finished up the week going back to Abby Jimenez because Great Circle was a long read, and again, I wanted something light-ish. And even though Jimenez talks about real struggles and in a romance, now that I know that, I come at it a lot differently. So, I started with her first book, The Friend Zone. In this, Kristen Peterson is facing a medically necessary hysterectomy. And she's young. She's in her mid-20s. And obviously, that's not gonna, that'll change her life. So she's planning her best friend's wedding, and she meets the best man, Josh Copeland. He is adorable. I totally loved him. But Josh wants a big family, and Kristen, he doesn't know her secret that she can't have a big family. And so she pushes him away, pushes him away, pushes him away. And then something tragic happens, and she just realizes that you shouldn't push away the ones that you love. That's all I'm going to say about that. I loved this book. I finished this in a night. I started it after work, and I just gobbled the whole thing up. There are no tabs in here because that's how quickly I tore through this. I loved Kristen. I loved Josh. There is something that happens in here that had I not realized Abby Jimenez's writing style, I probably would have felt the way I felt about Just for the Summer when I read that. As it was, I had to go back and reread it 3 times because I was like, did this really happen? It really happened. So that is all I read this past week. What I'm reading currently is the follow-up to The Friend Zone, the Happy Ever After playlist. And had not planned on reading this right away, but what happens in here, I needed to know some resolution on it, so I picked this up. I should finish this tonight, I hope. Again, sorry. Having a cold sucks. Okay, so I said The Great Circle led me to pick back up a book that was going to be a nonfiction read earlier this year. And it's because The Great Circle contains some characters who are based on real-life people. One of those real-life people is a major player in The Women with Silver Wings by Katherine Sharp Landek. This is what I'm reading now from nonfiction. I don't think I'll be able to finish it before the end of March, but it should... 2-3 weeks should be able to get this finished. This is my current purse book. Now, the key figure in Great Circle is not mentioned in the back of this, but I'm going to go ahead and read it to you anyway. Oh, shit. Rewind. Let me read. No, I can't read you the back of that because it spoils what happens in the Friend Zone. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Cornelia Fort was already in the air. At 22, Fort had escaped Nashville's debutante scene for a fresh start as a flight instructor in Hawaii. She and a student were in the middle of their lesson when the bombs began to fall, and they barely made it back to ground that morning. When the U.S. Army Air Forces put out a call for women pilots to aid the war effort, which is featured in here, Fort was one of the first to respond, as she became one of just over 1,100 women from across the nation to make it through the Army's rigorous selection process and earn their silver wings. For the remarkable aviators who would become the Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP, flying offered freedom, a community of like-minded peers, and a chance to contribute to the war effort, as well as an opportunity to show the world that women pilots were just as skilled and able as men. In The Women with Silver Wings, historian Katherine Sharp Landek takes us into their lives on the ground and in the air. The women ferried pursuits and bombers across the country and trained male pilots for service abroad, work that was exhilarating but dangerous. 38 WASP would not survive the war, but even taking into account these tragic losses, the program seemed to be a resounding success. Until, with the tides of war turning and fewer male pilots needed in Europe, Congress clipped the women's wings. The program was disbanded, the women sent home, but the bonds they'd forged never failed, and over the next few decades they came together to fight for recognition as the military veterans they were, and for their place in history. This is part of my Women's History Month and my Women in War reading project, and just something I intend to continue throughout the year to highlight women in war and in life. So, before I completely fall apart on camera, I'm going to wrap this up. Again, I had a great reading week. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear from you. I'm just trying to make it across the finish line. If you have any suggestions of books about women in war or otherwise, I'd love to hear from you. And if you've made it with me this far, as always, thank you for sticking with me on my cough-filled and sniffle-filled journey. Happy reading.